Good afternoon and welcome to Tetewathá, Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, LouAnn Stacey, and today is MCK Friday. Today I am joined by Grand Chief Joe Norton as well as Chief Rhonda Kirby, and today we're going to be talking about the Mercier Bridge expansion. That seems to be a very hot topic the last couple of weeks, and I think it's important that we get an opportunity maybe to talk a little bit about the history of the bridge, the working relationship, how Kahnawake got involved, because I'm really not even sure how old the bridge is, and there's been so much, every summer we go through construction repairs, north side, east side, west side, or whatever it is, it's their side, our side. I lose track sometimes, but every year you have to plan about going around. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So I guess my first question is, and could you give us maybe a little bit of a history actually on the Mercier Bridge? I'm not 100% sure,
Just for everyone's knowledge, the bridge is well over 80 years old. So we've had a long history of our community members working on the bridge, and more so in the 70s when the repairs and things had to start. So we have a lot of things that have gone on since then. And basically, or one of the most important things is at that time in the 70s, it was the OCQ who used to do inspections. And at that time, our community members were not happy. I mean, because of our long history, our experience in working on the bridges, that they felt they could do their own. So that was part of the reason there was a lot of collaboration, and that was the creation of the Mohawk Self-Insurance way back then.
So from the Mercier Bridge evolved some other things throughout the history, basically, right?
And I think it's important to note that there are part of the bridge is on the federal side, which is on our land, on our community land where we live, and the other part is on the provincial side. So we're working with two different entities when we're talking about the bridge work. So the part from the LaSalle side is considered provincial, and where we are is federal.
Kahnawake has always worked on the federal side. Have they worked on the provincial side? And have, from the beginning, was our men involved in the building of the actual bridge?
Yeah, right. I remember as a child when the Seaway had come through, and my father was actually working on the Mercier Bridge, not far from where we lived. So we'd go and we'd meet him for sometimes for lunch, and he'd give us the paycheck and bring it home and what have you, I think it's divided in a way, the whole Mercier Bridge, is that the road surface is considered provincial because there's the what is it called, the provincial highway code and all that stuff. So the road surface is considered provincial. The whole length. Now we dispute that when you come into Kahnawake because it's a different situation. Then the superstructure, if you want to call it that, the province still has some sort of involvement within the Kahnawake territory, but it's considered federal. But then when you go over the river from the Kahnawake shoreline to LaSalle, it's considered provincial. So it's divided in that way, and then you go right into the province. The federal government has, I think, the jurisdiction over the river itself. I don't know how it's divided, but federally and provincially, there's another jurisdiction there that on the water, in the water, the surface, the riverbed, So it's divided into a number of different sectors.
I'm glad you answered that, because that was one of my questions, because some community members have stated very eloquently that the water is ours as well.
Yeah.
And that belongs to Kahnawake. So, that was going to be one of my questions. What was the jurisdiction with regards to that? Because it gets very confusing in terms of who's making the calls, the bottom line.
If you go back in time, switching subjects a little bit, we had the Conservation Officers Program on the water, and we decided to enforce that, and we patrolled that for quite a while. So I've recently said we have to revive that again. We kind of said, well, we'll divide it in half the river is on our side, and we'll patrol half the river, because it's not practical to control all of the river. It's huge, but we said, though, we have access to all of the river because it's part of our history, part of our culture. Nobody will prevent us from going out there and fishing wherever we want. We don't need licenses. We don't need all that stuff that's out. Getting back to the bridge itself, as Rhonda has pointed out, it goes way back in time, 80 some odd years ago, when the first section was built. Of course, it was only a 2-lane span, and from that day forward, our people had demanded to be part of the construction of that bridge, and our people worked on it, so on and so forth. So there's been an ongoing situation in which, right to this day, we continue to maintain our right over it. And now it's going beyond that, really, because now we have to talk about the new span that's being proposed, and our push really is to be involved, right down to the nitty-gritty. What is it going to look like? What's the concept, and all the details that need to go with that. We have said we're going to be involved in that. You can't exclude us from that.
And I think it's important, because I think that's been the contentious thing within the community, is because are they looking to do this new span, take more land? And that is the root of the whole issue with regards to the Mercier Bridge, is, and the people got very upset. The community got upset. Different groups got upset, because right away you think of, brings you back to the loss of a lot of our land and how the government hasn't really worked with our people.
And we've tried to put that information out about exactly what the bridge is going to look like. We don't know. And as far as our communication with MTQ is that they're not really sure either, because of the different studies that need to go on before, knowing that information before they can actually have a conceptual design. We're still quite a few years away of actual conceptual design, and so those are some of the things that we've tried to, or we hope to anyway, today talk about. The original press release that we attended was in April of 2017. Since then, we've had several meetings. We've talked about our concerns of how the drilling goes on, what the different aspects. The KIPO staff is also a big part of this. We do have a special committee that talks about just those things, like the sturgeon spawning, the drilling aspects, what happens on the north wall, how big is the staging area. So there are a lot of things that are in part of our discussions.
So we're not getting a new span next year?
No.
Okay. That clarifies one question, because that was something that was out
and
and about.
Realistically, everyone needs to know that it's 2 lanes coming from LaSalle that connect to the federal side. So realistically, it will still be 2 spans. It's not going to be 6 spans that connect into 2 spans. It's the same thing. I mentioned that the bridge is over 80 years old. There's a lot of deterioration that has gone on, and hence all of the work that continues to go on for a good 50 years. More so in the last 10 years that there's been a lot of maintenance work that goes on.
And that's been a lot, because it affects a lot of people. So as soon as, people know it's construction, then things go a little bit.
There's historically several aspects to this. I know I've been involved. Prior to being on the council, I'd worked on the Mercier Bridge. I worked for late Johnny Deere. I worked for the late Billy Malush, and even during those times, there was a lot of disputes that were going on over the jurisdiction, who hires who, who can work there and that sort of thing. So it became even more obvious to me after I was on the council. And it was at one point in time where the work had stopped. And Joe Diom, who worked for Kahnawake at the time for the council, he and I and Wayne Delormier Sr., we had gone to a meeting in Montreal with Quebec officials, MTQ at the time, and we debated with them over, we had the jurisdiction, we had the authority, and we were going to continue to do the work because they wanted to give it to somebody else. And there was always a question of our credibility, our ability to do the work, and it continues on even to this day. And at that time, that was the beginning of developing MSI, as opposed to, I believe it was, what was the...
CNIST.
No, even before that, there was another SST, something. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, it is now CNIST.
CSS, yeah. So they were saying that they were going to impose that you have to work under these kinds of conditions, and we said no. So Wayne and Joe and I, we counter-argued, and we said, we'll be using U.S. OSHA standards. We're going to apply those, and that's when it started, and that's when we started our own self-insurance. And that built up to where we're at today. So there's always been that ongoing dispute back and forth. And fast forward to today, unfortunately, misinformation gets out there. Without any pre-discussion with the council, because as Rhonda pointed out, we do have a team that works, on a if not a daily basis, a weekly basis with the MTQ to get down to the nitty-gritty exactly what they want to do. And there was a meeting last week, myself and I was in Ross Montour, met representatives from the 207. Joe Diom was one of those representatives, and they were raising all kinds of questions and making comments, and I thought we had dispelled all of that until, unfortunately, representatives came on the radio station and said a bunch of things that were very, very, very disruptive as far as I'm concerned. And I don't mind saying that because that's what was done during that radio talk show program last week. And, we need to dispel all of that, make it very clear that, you're not going to be, and I use the phrase with the people that I met with, not one more inch of land. And that was my late sister's phrase, Selma. 25, 30 years ago, or whenever it was, she made that phrase publicly. And that's been the community's phrase ever since. And I said that to them. I said, this is the position of the council. We're not giving up any land. There's not going to be any additional land taken, in order to accommodate a 6-lane highway coming across, because there is not going to be any 6-lane. Well, we should have known in advance. Well, I said, the first comment I made is, if we met regularly, we wouldn't be meeting now to discuss this. There wouldn't be a last-minute demand, that we have to meet now. We have to talk about what's going on.
On that note, Joe will take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to K1037's Tetewathá Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, LouAnn Stacey, and today is MCK Friday. I'm joined by the Grand Chief Joe Norton and as well as Chief Rhonda Kirby, and we're talking about the Mercier Bridge expansion. And I guess prior to going to break, we were talking about the relationship, and I think one of the most important things here is how do the groups work together so that what happened last week on the show and any other topic doesn't do that. And I think one of my main questions for you when you were coming on the show was, how often and how on top do you have to stay on the Mercier Bridge stuff? Because it seems like a pretty big file. And you laid out a map that's a continual thing. It just doesn't sit on the side. And I think part of it is how do we convey that information so people know? And if people are interested, then maybe get involved or get on the committee. I don't know, but I think something good needs to come out of this because it's going to keep going. It'll be there, for the next several generations.
And, Joe mentioned earlier the creation of MSI, and that started in 1981, and that's all part of the growth that we've had in the community to support our own infrastructure here. So we've built it up. The Quebec government had a decree that acknowledged and recognized the labor regime that we have in place. So our labor office officially opened in 2016, where we have the competency. Although the Kahnawake Trades competency program started several years back, and that was all part of the recognition of the labor. So we've had, and I think at this point we're well over 300 iron workers and bridge workers who have been certified through the labor office. So again, it's building up, in capacity that we have here in the community, which the Quebec government has recognized, and they also sent out a press release last week saying that again.
It's important for all of the community, which includes the longhauls, to know what is happening in Kahnawake. I mean, I mentioned to our visitors last week. I said, "Do you know anything about Recreation Bay?" And there was silence. I said, "Well, there's a major proposal to clear up Recreation Bay, clean it all up, so that there's a proper flow of water, so that there's not all that growth and all of there." I said, and that's a major thing that's going to happen. And if you don't know about it, or and then at the last minute you jump out of nowhere and say, "Well, nobody told us," kind of thing, Then I said, we have to be talking on a regular basis. Whether we agree, disagree, or whatever, the point is we have to talk.
And I think that's just basic communication, so that the community can go ahead together. Whether you agree or not, that's not the issue. It's the communication back and forth, because I think it's important what happens on the Mercier Bridge. It's important what happens in that area. I did speak to Lynn and to Patrick, and there is a spawning thing just off to the side. I forgot the name of the fish, but
it's sturgeon.
Sturgeon. Yeah. And but I did ask those questions because I think those are the kinds of things they were on the air, and I did, because whatever we're going to do is going to impact other things around it. Also, the way the seaway is built, are there any things for the blasting to have impact on those walls, those rocks, who knows? I mean, anything is possible, and those are the questions that need to be answered.
And after that discussion that Joe had, we also spoke with Lynn, and we did have a meeting with MTQ on the following day. I think it was August 1st. But we do have a list of questions that have gone on. We've also taken questions from the Facebook page, and we've sent that along. And as we're getting answers to some of the questions, it will be posted online.
I guess one of the questions is, and I'll ask this right now, if people have questions, should they call at the council office and ask? And who should they ask? Because I think that's a critical piece.
I'll read some of the questions.
Sure.
So if people, it could be the same thing. What part of the bridge is being replaced and why? We talked about it. Starts at the south side, and basically it's the deterioration of the bridge itself. So I think we all have the same concerns, and it's the safety of our community members as well as everyone else who's using the bridge. Were other options considered, including maintenance of the existing bridge or relocating the bridge elsewhere? And if so, what was considered, and why is the current option selected? If you look at where the bridge is located, I think it's an impossible task to move the bridge anywhere else at this point because of the location and the connection. But, we'll have all of those answers on the bridge. Will more land on the north wall be required for the new bridge? If so, how much? And it goes to what Joe was speaking about, not 1 more inch. I mean, we are talking about building new piers there, and that was part of why the drilling was going to go on, to see if the land below would be able to sustain new piers and the weight of a new bridge. So we'll have all of that. One thing they did mention at our meeting was that it's possible to have less piers than what we currently have.
Because there's new ways of
There's
doing
new ways,
things, right?
and after 80 years, they have learned, better ways of constructing piers. So we don't know how many, but I mean, that's a positive thing to have less piers. What will the new bridge look like? That we have no idea. How will the new bridge be constructed? If multiple options are being considered, what are they? Has a feasibility study been completed to assess the options for the reconstruction, and can this be shared? And, we've mentioned as soon as we have all of that information, we will be putting it out. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows, too, we do have a community meeting next Tuesday night, and the Mercier Bridge project will be on our agenda.
So if people have questions, they can also go there.
Yeah. And you're more than welcome to contact communications. They usually filter all the questions rather than calling, several different people within the organization.
I wanted to get back to something that Joe said, because I was thinking about this. You had said years back they were concerned about the workers from our community working on the bridge. And if you look at today and you read a lot of the people who are the users of the bridge, and people speak on behalf of our workers. And it's like really exciting, because they said they should get them to do all the bridges. They should be the ones doing the other bridges that were being repaired, and talk about come a long way. But the reputation of the workers really has also been a big part of it,
And that was exactly what was said when they put out their press release. When the government of Quebec put out their press release in April 2017. They acknowledged that they prominently acknowledge our iron workers, our skywalkers, who have taken part in building some of the most famous and complex bridges and structures in North America, and that have continued collaboration will be a critical component of the bridge rebuild. So I think we should be proud of our heritage and where all of our men have worked across this country.
Yeah, because I think what was interesting when they were talking about the men, I got to actually see, and I mentioned this last week on the show, a video from Brooklyn, and it was when they made the Verrazano Bridge, and how many people, and I was watching the video intently because I know there were lots of people from our community actually worked on that bridge. And almost all the bridges I know in New York, in Brooklyn and the surrounding area, they were all guys from town on that.
Well, all the major structures, all the bridges, as you said, in New York, around the Manhattan and so on and so forth. At the time, the Twin Towers, which was an incredible feat. People worked there. I worked there for a while. And then you come back home over here in Montreal. The Olympic Stadium, it wasn't steel, some steel components, but it was heavy lifts, and it required the expertise and experience of our people to put that together. It was like a Lego set, if you want to call it that, in putting together the Olympic Stadium. And we worked there, and it was a new. Some had seen that kind of work before, others hadn't. I'd never seen it before, and so it was a first for me. But getting back to the Mercier Bridge, it's the question that were raised from our guests from 207 at the time were basically, you don't have any plans, but you're already doing drilling and all that. And I reminded Joe Diome, I said, look, you're an engineer, you understand, you know that in a pre-feasibility study, you got to start somewhere. So one of those somewheres is actually drilling and finding out if the
ground,
the waterbed can take the strain of a bridge, and things like that. I said that's part of pre-feasibility study. I says, and I've known that, I'm not an engineer or anything like that, but certainly I do have some knowledge about how those things happen. And the thing here is, the question I like to ask is there people against a new bridge, a new span being built? Because if they are, the alternative to that is that that span that exists right now, it'll get shut down. And there'll be only one span as there was right at the beginning when it first opened with 2 lanes. Can we live with that? Can we live like that? Because the governments are not going to spend any more money on a span that's deteriorating so bad that, it's maybe in 5 years it'll get shut down,
I have a
And it's
question.
not a pressure tactic, it's a reality,
Yeah. I have a question years back, and I guess it was around the 1990s when there was talk of placing the bridge some other place. Whatever happened with that?
Well, that was all, you know what? That was all part of
I have to ask.
Kahnawake cooperating
Yes.
to allow for Highway 30 to be built
Okay.
internally, not,
Yes.
just up the road from here
Right.
at the traffic circle. That's why you have that circle there, because it was supposed to go straight
across.
west.
Yes.
And then from there, they were going to build another bridge that would connect with Highway 13. That was all related and tied into Mirabel Airport, and all that kind of stuff. So when we said, no, we're not doing that here, that scrapped that whole idea.
I couldn't remember, but I know there was a
Yeah.
spot when that was brought up, and I just wondered if that played a part, like where we're at today, because again, it's a critical piece in history, because I guess as I'm hearing from you is that this is an ongoing battle. It's not something that just lays there for a couple of years and then it comes back up. It's continually being worked on.
The wants and the needs of our neighbors are going to continue to grow, so we have to continue to say no. You put that there, there's an infrastructure that's there now, known as Mercier Bridge. It's got a certain footprint. You have to stay within that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there's a need, then they'll have to look for some other place. I would take, because there's no way there's land being given up. There's no way anything's changing as far as the existing bridges.
Even that, if it was built somewhere else in the St. Lawrence River system around here, we'd still have a say, because it's part of our history, part of our culture. There are things going on right now downriver and above river, and they advise us. They want to know if we have anything to say or what have you, because there's species of fish and all of that, and we take an interest in that.
Again, I guess that's another battle that continues to be important, because you can't give up that as well.
So we're still a long way off before there's anything, that actually happens on the ground for the reconstruction. We're looking at plans and specifications to be only completed in 2022. So it's still a ways off, and that was the whole reason for having the different studies go on. And there's some studies that can only be done at a certain time, and the sturgeon spawning thing was specifically, when they're spawning. So we're looking at the preliminary phase to be in the winter of 2021, and hopefully the final phase would be the end of 2021. So call for tender possibly in the spring of 2022.
Did they give you a scenario if it can't be supported? Like, supposing, is there another option if through their studies it turns out it's not possible?
So the studies have to be completed
Okay.
in order to know that.
But did they think, or they're not thinking that far yet?
No.
They're probably just thinking positive, and it's going to go through.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
Considering if the bridge is not there, what our community members have to go through. We talked about the number of people that have to go to different hospital appointments, and the children's, and what we would have to do in order to get downtown. So I think we're hopeful that we can come to a resolution within the community as well as the government to find a way of how to build that bridge.
Let me ask a question. Which government's harder to work with, or are they both hard to work with? Because you're working with two different bodies.
They might say that about us.
No, I wouldn't think we would be difficult at all. But I'm curious to know, like, who are they? And maybe this is more a question for Joe, because you've been in the position longer, in terms of working with them on this, because it's been ongoing for a number of years. And do they get our jurisdiction? Do they get our concern? Do they get that?
From first time I was involved till now, they understand it, and I think they try to manipulate it.
Ah, okay.
And when I say they, I'm talking about the Quebec government.
Okay.
And for whatever it's worth, the changing of governments doesn't help too.
Yes.
We get a different understanding to a certain degree, then all of a sudden a new regime comes in and it changes things. Though, I'll put it this way, fortunately for us, we still have the same bureaucrats that we deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't change them.
Okay.
They've been there now for, I don't know how many years, but
It's been a number of years.
they continue to be there, so they know, they understand. And they're in the meetings with the transport department, you know. The federal government, well, they have their standards and they have their, I guess, their laws behind them about, you know, because the federal government owns properties right across the country, different bridges and all of that. And so in I think just about every province, there's a federal property that they oversee. So in their situation, they'll generally just sit back and allow the dispute, the arguments to take place between, you know, the province and
Right.
and ourselves, you know. But they do have some say, and they provide a certain amount of funding, which is an important part of having the contracts and agreements. And one of their former employees, if you want to call it that, who was the president of the Canada Bridge Corporation, he made a special pledge for the exclusivity to our people, you know, to work on the bridge. So that's when the Bridge Consortium came into existence, and from there it's been, you know, history.
Yeah.
And it's important to know, we have the different governments that we work with, but everyone has a mandate.
Exactly.
So, we have to make sure that we listen to one another, we acknowledge what each other is saying, but we all have our own mandates.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a positive relationship.
And I also think knowing the position you're standing on, you know, if it's no land, it's no land. So, you know, not thinking outside of that. So they have to work within what would be available.
You know, and that's part of the special committee that we have. That's one of our, an important part of it, making sure that all of those things are taken into consideration.
Rhonda is well aware of the fact that, you know, not only are you talking to governments, but then you have to deal with different construction organizations. And there's quite a number of them, you know, and it gets to be confusing because some may be supportive, others might not be supported. You got the 7-Eleven local union, you know, and it's working with all of that and modeling something that meets the requirements of our people. It's not necessarily meeting their standards. They've had to change their laws. They've had to create different things to allow for what we're doing here. It's like union, non-union. That's what we have here. And even internally, we're butting heads over that, you know.
Yeah.
For quite some time now, we've come to that point where, you know.
And that's all part of what the Labor Office is all about. You know, we have our compliance officers, we have our certification people within the organization, health and safety. So again, you know, it's capacity building within the organization, and we're really helping community members be able to get their different cards if they do want to work other places.
Right.
You know, getting that recognition. So it's important, you know, we have a good relationship with DEWA and their training program, which helps a lot of our young iron workers take the course and be able to get their certification.
Okay. On that note, we'll take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Tetewathá, Partyline Talkshow. I'm your host, LouAnn Stacey, and today is MCK Friday. Today we're speaking with Grand Chief Joe Norton and Chief Rhonda Kirby, and we're talking about the Mercier Bridge expansion. I have a question about that office. Has that made it a little bit easier in negotiating and talking? Because it seems like this is a lot bigger than just government stuff. You know, you talk about the different unions, you talk about different construction companies, you talk about different people of different parts. In a bridge, it's just not the steel, the iron, the paving, you know, because it's all different companies.
Mm-hmm. There are, and that's all part of what the Labor Office is working on. We've recently hired Lily Dalaboost, who is responsible to work with CCQ and the other unions. So she meets with them. And if there's a a young person who might want to get into another field, she would direct them into the correct training program that they might need, or help them to take the testing. One of the issues that our community members have had is that the tests are basically all in French.
Yes.
So they've been able to work it out that, at certain times of the year that it's in English, where our community members are able to take that test.
Because that's a big thing in a lot of different in health, psychologists, nurses, that's been a lot of political issue too, is taking testing in French.
Well, the trades today are becoming more and more professional.
Yes.
At one time, it was like, when I joined the union, when I became an iron worker 50 years ago, it was just part of the flow. Go ahead, go in, and you're in. That's it. That's all. Today, with the requirements and the demands of the unions and the safety and all of that, you have to become knowledgeable about so many different things. It's not just putting bolts in a hole, and
right.
tightening up. It's a wide expansion of all of that, and you have to become a professional. You have to have certificates. You have to have all these different acknowledgments that confirming that you can do what's required of you. It's like that here, and I'm hearing out in Western Canada, in places where there's a lot of work that's going on. You have to be certified. They have to have these safety meetings. They have to have all these different types of meetings that all these the workers have to attend. Never had that before.
I think in your day, and I remember my dad saying it, they would just, your parent would be our grandparents and pack you up and let's go. You're going to ironwork. You were 16 and they would say you were 18 and I know a lot of stories from older people that's how it was. Oh, well, we're heading out. We're going to New York, or we're going to Boston, or whatever city, wherever the work was. And you would just pack up, just go and learn by doing, and, have your parent, uncles yelling at you. That was part of the workforce in ironwork.
And even though you might have been an iron worker for 20, 25 years, they are still required to take the refresher courses.
Yes.
And that's part of the competency and certification that comes along these days. There's new techniques, I guess, that everyone has to be aware of.
And I think even a lot of the unions now, you have to write a test before even get accepted. Before you would just go, and next thing you know, you were joining one of
and that's part
the
of
local
the
unions.
training that our younger guys are taking today, before they actually go for a test.
Definitely, times have changed. So in terms of the bridge, what are some of the follow-up things that are going to happen between now and 2021, 22?
Well, I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of questions that are coming in. We will put them on our website for people to see. We will have our meeting again on Tuesday night, August 13th, I believe. Yes, 13th. And we'll give another update. Basically, what we did today. And as we find out information, we will certainly pass that on to the community.
Because I think that's sometimes a big thing, is the communications and getting information out, and there needs to be a number of things. I still haven't found the magical answer that addresses everybody, you know? And I hear it all the time.
We try. I mean, between the radio and the newspaper, people
meetings.
say, well, they don't listen to the radio, they don't read the paper. So, we're always looking at different ways, especially with the younger generation. And I guess it's more of a Facebook thing.
Yeah.
So we're always trying. It may be that in a couple of weeks or months that we will have a special meeting just on the Mercier Bridge and what we know. I think MTQ did mention that they would be willing to give a presentation of where we started, in 2017 and where we are and what the next couple of years. But certainly there's not going to be any construction of the span for at least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So right now it's all the preliminary work, the testing and negotiations, I would guess, as well.
I guess just a word from a philosophical, political point of view, as an act of sovereignty, we can say, no, you're not going to build a bridge. Or we can say, yes, you're going to build a bridge, but this is the way it's going to get done, you know? So there's that dynamic that we want to make sure people in Kahnawake understand, as well as, you know, whoever's sitting across the table from us. They have to understand that too.
So I guess it's not just a question of yes or no. It's how can it be done based on what we want.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the main things is that, you know, it's all Kahnawake workers that will be involved.
And that's like the biggest push in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. But again, you know, if people need to understand, one, I think you've said it, Joe, is the philosophy behind it. And if people are concerned about it, then people need to get their concerns addressed now, whether it's through questions on Facebook or actually set up a meeting and start discussing, you know, what is it? You know, if you have questions, then ask those questions. Because it's going to impact a lot of people, a lot of things, the environment, and I think that's just as important to us as a bridge.
Yeah.
You know, and not ready to give up anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we are working on a communication plan, and it won't be ready for Tuesday night, but you know, in the next couple of months, we will have something ready for everyone.
Yeah. Any other on this topic? We still have a few minutes left. Any other thoughts or things you wanted to share?
I think what had happened yesterday, there was the cleaning of the...
oh, yes.
People thought it was sewer that was going into the river, and that wasn't the case.
It was the cleaning of the water system or something I read,
I think. The hydrants had to be flushed in order to... Well, they have to be cleaned. That went into the drain, and that's what ended up mixing with all the dirt that's in the drains, and that was going into the river.
Because I think people were really upset. They thought it was sewage.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. So,
and it was at a couple of different spots along the seaway, because I seen different photos and different videos from different parts of the community. So it wasn't just one.
Well, we do have several fire hydrants in the community, and they all, and that's the whole reasoning for having the drainage going out there. But it was basically water mixed with a lot of dirt.
Yes, I saw it.
When I came here before the discussion started, I got my car sprayed, flushed.
Oh.
They had opened the hydrant right next to the council office.
Oh, okay, yes. Was it all dirt? No, just kidding.
No, it's clean.
I think it all depends on where it is and what part of the community, because sometimes I see them flush across the street from my house and just seen plain water. Yeah. I've not seen it look like what was on the videotape yesterday.
And I had a call too from a community member that their water was all dirty, and I said, you just have to wait for a bit, you know, run it for a couple of minutes after they finish, and it was fine. So I think a lot of people might have had that problem too, and I'm sure everything is under control today.
We'll have to get Martin to come on and talk about how it works, you know, because I know he answered a lot of the questions yesterday. So, and I'm sure people were all, but I think on a good note, you know, and you have to look at the positive side of things. At least people are reporting stuff and not waiting till things are out of it. You know, sometimes it's little things, sometimes it's big things, but at least people are talking. And I think that's what, you know, a lot of these things come out to. And how do we do that? You know, how do we as a community move on? Because we need to start the talking in order that we can come across as one, you know, whether we agree on the same thing, you know. And I think sometimes that's what's difficult for us as a community.
Yeah. Well, next week, also on the agenda, we're going to be discussing at the community meeting the issue about asbestos, you know. And that's going to be that is a hot topic now, and we have to make some clarifications about what is and what isn't, you know, so give some people give the level of, level of comfort that, you know, it's, if there is such a thing in a situation like this, but that'll be a topic of discussion.
So if people have questions on that, come out to the community meeting. And the community meeting's Golden Age?
Golden Age.
Yeah.
So that's on Tuesday night, August 13th.
Is that that's the two topics, or are there other topics? Because I didn't actually see the agenda, so.
It is. We have our usual land allotments, but I think considering the scope of the two projects, it'll take up the whole time.
Conversation.
Yeah. And an open discussion if time permits.
Those two topics, I'm not sure. Depending if people go, that's another thing. People, you want information, you need to get out and go ask.
Yep.
Any other topics or any other things you want to discuss? Have you been to the recital?
Yes, I have.
And what's your thoughts?
I haven't been there.
You haven't been there?
I'm going
Okay.
this afternoon.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, it was well receptive, and I really enjoyed what I was able to see before I came here. It was well done.
Because I think this too is a monumental thing that, in our community we need to start, really looking at stuff and start speaking the same language and asking questions.
Certainly
and,
a lot of organization has gone into putting on this event.
Definitely.
It's well set up, and there was certainly a lot of people when I was there this morning.
And a lot of different people, I've read or spoke to people and said it was really, really well done, and you learn a lot. And I think that's what we need to start. We don't all have all the answers. We need to hear what other people have to say. And I've said it a number of times when I've spoken to political people. We're at a crossroads in our community, and we really, really need to take advantage of doing something that's a little more in the collective frame of mind, That's my thought. I don't know, Anything else?
No, just thank you. Enjoy your weekend, and
Yes.
hope to see you at our community meeting next week.
Yes, and go Mohawks go on Saturday night. I have to get that in. I always have to get that in. Coming up next week on Monday, I'll be joined by the Kahnawake Minor Hockey Association. Peter Jacobs, Justin Horn, and other board members will be in. We'll be talking about registration that's actually coming to an end within 2 weeks, and it actually hasn't been very good. So people need to get out and get their registrations done. Coming up next with the 1 o'clock news is Luca Caruso Moro. Have a great weekend, everybody. Onigiwahi.
Yeah.
And we're done. Thank you.